All right, thank you, Rosa, and hi everyone. Good evening. Uh, Thanks for joining us this afternoon or evening for the second session of this three-part series that we have tried to put together. This is essentially ideas and subjects that you never really get trained on or encounter during medical training, but when you enter the real life of an adult physician, these become priorities in your life. And we're trying to create this setup so you're informed, you are exposed to these ideas, and provide you with resources and resources that essentially you can be mindful of what to anticipate down the line. So these series are put together in collaboration between PSPS and the support of our partners in APM Wealth with Justin Harvey, who's going to be one of our speakers tonight. Uh, we're going to have four different sections, different topics. We're going to talk about different practice models, understanding the contracts, networking, and personal considerations. And at the end, we'll wrap it up with some Q&A. Please write down your questions. There's a Q&A section at the bottom. Please uh, submit your questions, and we'll love to answer those as we get toward the end of the session. Uh, Again, once more, thanks to APM Wealth and Justin Harvey for supporting our webinar series. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Justin Harvey, CFP, who's a physician spouse and a financial advisor who focuses his business on helping anesthesiologists and pain management physicians build wealth and make intelligent career decisions. He founded an investment management firm, APM Wealth, in 2017, and his wife, Dr. Sarah Harvey, is a private practice anesthesiologist in Portland, Oregon. He also hosts the Anesthesia and Pain Management Success podcast. So I'm going to pass it on to Justin Harvey. Thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Nasseri. I'm very pleased to be addressing this group this evening. Uh, Educating physicians about money topics is one of my passions, and so I'm excited for tonight. I definitely encourage anybody who has questions to drop them in the Q&A button below. I'll be eager to address those at the end. A little bit of disclosure about me, my professional life. Shouldn't be any conflicts for this evening. Keep on moving, please. Next slide. Please don't rely on anything. Back to the disclaimer. Don't rely on anything I'm telling you tonight to make any important life-altering career decisions. Please work in conjunction with a trained professional. Next slide. All right, practice models. There's a lot of different ways to describe different practice models, and I had to pick some way of distinguishing different types of practices from one another. So this isn't strictly technically correct, but this is the least wrong way I could think of looking at the different ways that physicians work together to serve patients. So we're going to look at 5 different types of practices: bigger hospital-based, bigger private groups, small private groups, which I'm defining as less than 3-ish doctors, locums, and then launching a practice yourself. Next slide, please. Um, First, the most important thing is knowing what you want is the best way to get it. So there can be a really good job with really good compensation and really an attractive sort of profile for the clinical composition and flexibility and other things. But if it's not the right fit for you, it's going to be a painful union. So understanding what your own goals are is a necessary first step to getting the job that's going to be a good fit for you. And depending on how flexible you are geographically, there may or may not be practices of the profile you're seeking in your geography. So knowing that in advance, you might just have to take what you can get. If you want to be in a certain state or in a certain city, that's where your spouse is from, that's where your family is, you just know you want to raise your kids there, you may have to just take what you can get. Next slide. Practices of different types vary from one another in important ways. And these are a couple of the ways in which they vary. How much money you can make, how your compensation grows over time, whether or not you can participate in outside business opportunities like surgery centers, outside consulting, etc., whether or not you can do research, the best way to negotiate for a certain job. You can imagine if you're negotiating with XYZ Academic Center, that's going to be pretty different than if a peer of yours, a professional peer, is launching a practice and you want to be a partner in that practice. That's a totally different conversation. Understanding what's valuable for your employer, understanding what are the business challenges of the different models, and then what kind of other opportunities exist. These all vary based on the practice profile. So, a couple general rules of thumb. The first is in looking at the bigger institutions, it's going to be typically more stable, meaning like you're not going to wake up one day and we've got to shut our doors. Um, it's a little bit more difficult to negotiate. You should always try to negotiate. And I've seen, even with big established hospital groups, national pain groups, people who are able to negotiate a signing bonus, negotiate an improvement in pay, always try. But it's tougher when you're dealing with a legal department rather than when you're dealing with a prospective partner physician who just wants to get the deal done and is more likely to give you what you want. The bigger groups are typically more well-resourced in terms of having a build out that is, maybe having all the latest gear that you're looking for clinical care. And this last one is important. And it's important to remember when you're negotiating. New physicians can pretty quickly cover their own cost. And the reason for that is, well, there's a few reasons. Reimbursement is probably better in the bigger groups because they have better negotiating power with the payers. That's number one. And number two is they typically have patient volume where they can immediately get you pretty busy on day one. And so you don't have this ramp up phase where you're earning a base salary that is maybe a bigger number where your patient volume isn't covering your cost. That would be typical in a smaller group, but in a bigger group, you can come in and immediately cover your own cost. So you should know that when you're negotiating. If they're making you feel bad about how much money you're asking for, I can almost guarantee that if it's anywhere near the MGMA median, that you're going to immediately earn multiples of that for your employer. So don't be bashful in asking for, reasonable compensation. General principles for the smaller groups. There's a lot more flexibility in negotiation. Again, if you're working with a managing physician partner directly to negotiate your contract, you're talking to the decision maker, and there may be intangible factors that come into play that work in your favor. There's more flexibility in compensation terms as a result. Understanding your future partners, your future potential partners, or your coworkers is very important because it's going to go a long way towards determining the culture of the group you're going to join. If you're in a big, if you're in a pain department in a big hospital and you interview with a person you don't really like, that you don't respect or don't jive with, or you don't like their clinical approach, like it doesn't matter if there's 37 other pain docs. But if there's one pain doc and that's your boss and maybe your partner one day, that can be a problem. So you want to keep that in mind. Business risk can totally wipe out a smaller practice much more quickly. I was just talking with a pain doctor in the Midwest who was having a problem with cash flow because one of their big payers was just like very delayed on paying for reasons that they couldn't figure out, and the revenue cycle was getting all clogged up, and it was actually causing a cash crunch. And it was a real crisis for the practice. That's unlikely to happen with the university hospital, but that does happen with small businesses. And then finally, understanding this in negotiation is good. New physicians are usually a net cost because it takes time to ramp up. If you're one physician and maybe you've got a PA and you're humming at like 110% of your capacity, and then because you're at 110%, you want to hire somebody, a new physician comes in and maybe you get 20 or 30% of your capacity that gets offloaded from the founding physician, but you're still only at 30%. You're going to need to spend a lot of your time building referral relationships, getting new patients in the door, and getting busy in order to cover your own cost. You want to make sure you have a compensation structure that allows you to pay your bills at the beginning, but also that is equitable to your future employer, especially if partnership is sort of in view for you and you want to show that you're someone who understands the big picture. Next slide. Locums and PSAs, I'm not going to talk too much about these other than to say they're their own thing. For anybody who's anesthesia trained here, locums anesthesia is very lucrative right now. It's actually been like ransacking a lot of pain fellowships. And it can be a useful tool in a multi-prong approach if you're trying to, especially if it dovetails nicely with launching a practice. If you're trying to launch a practice, you can do some locums 1 or 2 days a week, even if it's pain locums. Pain locums doesn't pay as well as anesthesia locums, but there can be a sort of multi faceted approach that is 1 or 2 days of locums and then 1 or 2 days of launching a practice, and that can help you pay your bills while also building clinical momentum in your business. A PSA, physician service agreement, is typically a contract between a physician where they're working at a hospital, contracting with that hospital to provide services in, for example, an HOPD, an outpatient pain department, and they would have some sort of agreed upon metrics for how they're going to be paid. And they contract independently with that hospital as their own entity. So they're working in the hospital, in the pain department, but they have their own entity. And they have flexibility around customizing that arrangement. Next slide. In terms of the big hospital-based groups, um, typically there is stability because there's a lot of patients. Where there's a lot of patients, there's a lot of ways to monetize the patient experience all through the healthcare ecosystem. It's not even just pain, it's the procedures that they're going to get down the road that are more invasive. It's all the imaging, it's everything. So there's stability because of that. And also there's, facility fees and reimbursement is better when you're bigger and all of that. There's a big geographic footprint, and there's often money to spend on augmenting your reputation in a specific region. As a result, they're not dependent on a specific doctor, and contracts are standardized. You're a little more cog in the wheel, which isn't inherently bad necessarily. It does mean some things in terms of the flexibility you're going to have. Maybe it's going to be harder to taper FTE. You're not going to get specific asks, likely, but there may be a really good baseline of benefits in this situation, specifically in the academic centers where maybe there's a 401 or a 403B and there's a 457. So you can really get a lot of pre-tax contributions into retirement plans. And maybe there's a tuition reimbursement program. And maybe if you're working for a municipality, maybe there's a pension as well, or the VA would have a pension associated with it. Kaiser has a pension associated with it. So that pension benefit can be an important part of your financial success and is useful to keep in view. Next slide. Okay, with the bigger groups, and I know I have back-to-back sections here, so I'm going to try to get through the rest of these slides, and then I have a negotiation section immediately following, and then I'll take any specific questions at the end, so drop those questions in the Q&A. Bigger groups are going to have a lot in common with the hospital-based setting. Understanding who owns the group is really important. Is it private equity owned? Is there doctors that own it? Some combination, some other, is it hospital owned? Is it, what is it? And specifically, what does that mean for your partnership track options if they exist? Are you eventually maybe going to be an owner one day? Do you even want that? If so, what are the terms of buy-in? And how does that allow you to participate or not in ancillary businesses? The ancillary businesses, and by that, it's like primarily surgery center, but also labs, imaging, some other stuff, DME. Those are a meaningful lever for building wealth in many contexts. And for an independent pain practice, because reimbursement keeps getting cut and cut and cut and cut and cut every year, it's necessary to monetize the practice in as many ways as possible in order to just remain solvent. So as a physician who's participating in the independent pain ecosystem, you should be aware of that, and you should understand like there's opportunity for you as well as an independent physician to do the surgery center, to participate in DME, to have a share of the lab profit, etc. Next slide. These are some things you got to watch out for. With these, I'll call them multi-specialty, or really it's often like an ortho group where they're hiring a pain guy or gal, or maybe there's like 3 pain docs and 20 orthopods, and they want to keep pain in-house. This is where I've seen the most political, problematic relationships. Or maybe it's like a neurospine group and there's one pain doc. You're always going to be seen as a second-class citizen, in my observation. And I'm sure there are exceptions, and I'm sure if you interview with one of these places, they'll tell you that you are the exception. But be warned, if you're one of a couple pain docs and everybody else did a surgical residency, they're always going to look down on you if you didn't do a surgical residency, in my observation. So just understand that down the line, when it comes to like how are we dividing surgery center profits, how are we valuing, giving people access to buying into real estate or other business specific questions, it might matter. And that line might get drawn between participants and non along specialty lines, and that would be a huge bummer. So just something to be aware of. This last one is also really important. Understand if you're coming in, why are they hiring? If it's a smaller group in particular, what happened to the last doctor? Are you the first one in this role? Or are you replacing somebody? Or maybe you're replacing like a revolving door of doctors who all work there for 4 months each and then get pissed off and quit. You would want to know that. And so asking, why are you filling the role? How long has the prior occupant been there? Can I talk to the prior occupant of this role? That can give you a lot of insight as to the kind of practice you're getting into. Next slide. Smaller groups, um, there's a lot of cultural implications bound up in the personality of the founder or founders or, the partnership. And so just being aware of that, making sure that you jive, making sure that you respect them, that they respect the staff, and that there's healthy communication, that the clinical pathways are ones that jive with your conscience. That they're not under investigation by the OIG. I mean, I would literally like check these things, and you can look that stuff up. The personalities often drive the answers to those questions, and so looking at that is really important. These can also be the best opportunities if you are entrepreneurially minded. If there is a path to partnership, you can really meaningfully contribute. You can own a piece of the business, and that business can be valuable to be sold one day. And that is, again, I'm the wealth manager, financial advisor, so I'm looking at things often through a wealth building lens, and this setup can have a lot of opportunity in that vein. Next slide. Launching a practice. I could do a whole nother presentation on this. I'll just say it happens. People actually do it out of fellowship sometimes. It depends on the geography. It depends on your reimbursement. It depends on the competition, but you can like finish fellowship, launch a practice, or be a couple years into attending hood and do your own thing. There's some things you've really got to understand, though. You need to understand revenue cycle. You need to understand reimbursement. You need to understand business. You need to know how to read a P&L. If I'm speaking Greek to you right now, don't launch a practice until you learn these things. Get a mentor, get a good consultant, build a team. It does take a village in order to run a successful business, but this is something that can be done with the right folks around you. Next slide. Contracts. Okay, we're going to just hustle through this, and then I will pass the baton to the next presenter. With contracts and negotiation, again, start with what is important to you. There's no such thing as a good or bad contract inherently, although I will say some are more pernicious than others. But if you get what you want, then it's all good. So if FTE flexibility after 2 years, if you want to be able to go point 0.8 after 2 years because you want to like spend time with your kids, like you should understand that. You should also be able to observe that in the practice you're considering joining. If you want to participate in the business through ASC, if you like the idea of being a key opinion leader and talking to the who's who of the device groups and having the bandwidth to do that, if you want to advance the science, if you want to make a lot of money, like just figuring out what you want and making sure your contract accommodates that is the first step. Next slide. I'm going to look at these pillars of contracts and consideration. Next slide. So there's a wide range of how pain doctors get paid. On the left, I'll call it the most stable, the most simple and straightforward is you just get a salary. It's $450,000 a year for as many RVUs as your employer can get you to produce. That obviously produces certain incentives. It incentivizes the doctor to work as little as possible to make the salary. It incentivizes the employer to crack the whip and make them work as much as possible for the fixed cost. Is it going to be equitable? Sometimes. So just understanding where the conflict is and navigating that is an important part of being happy in a role with a salary. On the other end of the spectrum is the production side of things, where you're getting paid on a work RVU production basis or a percent of collections basis. This is, if you're not treating patients, you're not getting paid. This is very rewarding for folks who are busy and entrepreneurially minded. It can be punitive for folks who they just want to treat patients and they don't want to spend all their time talking to chiropractors and family medicine docs and orthopods trying to build a referral network. And it's particularly painful if they don't negotiate a sufficient guaranteed base. So upside through um, a upside through like an RVU or percent of collections compensation scheme can be really a great thing to align incentive if you have a guaranteed base of 25,000, 30,000, 35,000 a month. If you're never going to make less than that, then you just make that until you get into production territory. When your production exceeds that number, then you'll be good. But if you only have like 3 months of runway and then you drop into production, you might be taking a big pay cut. And as a 32-year-old who just got married, has a kid, and is trying to buy a house, like that is a financial catastrophe. So when you're on the production side of the spectrum, make sure that you have a sufficient guaranteed base to allow you to pay your bills. Next slide. Um, let's go to the next slide. I want to give you a sense of sanity check. Like if I'm looking at a number, if I'm looking at a contract, how do I even know if I'm in the ballpark of reasonable? If you have work RVU targets, and you're either going to get RVUs or percent of collections are typically how these are expressed. Now, depending on the payer mix and the composition of the revenue of the practice, could be either of these or it could be something totally different. But if it's $65 or $70 per work RVU, then you're probably going to be close to something reasonable around the MGMA median, which I think is near $500,000 nationally in 2024 as of the latest data that I've seen. If you're looking at a percent of collections, typically it's 40%. That's the rule of thumb. So a reasonable contract might say you're going to earn $30,000 a month gross and you're going to get 40% of collections. So you're going to earn $30,000 a month, that's $360,000 a year until you get to 40% of collections exceeding that number on a monthly basis. So you're at 30, 30, 30, 30 each month, and then you start to get more than that. That provides a nice downside protection and upside alignment. Something like that is a good starting point in terms of a compensation arrangement. If it's 30% of collections or 25% of collections, or if it's an RVU target of 10,000 and a salary of 400,000, that's $40 per work RVU, and you're not anywhere near where you need to be. So that means you're not going to get paid more than 400K unless you exceed 10,000 work RVUs. So that would be inequitable in favor of the employer. So again, these are some of the sanity checks you want to apply to make sure that you're within a stone's throw of the MGMA median is a good starting point. Next slide. Outside business opportunities can be very important in terms of the wealth building journey because this is your 1099 income. Maybe you're making 400, 500, 600 W-2, like employee wages from your practice. But if you can do some, I'm teaching a seminar or a workshop or a lab on the weekends, and I'm doing some medical legal, I'm doing depositions with attorneys, I have medical directorships with the local surgery center. I'm doing locums on the side. Any of these create 1099 income, self-employment income, which is a whole new income stream, which you can do cool stuff with that. Not only can you pay off debt and save up your money, but you can do a self-employment retirement plan. You have more tax flexibility, and it gives you different levers to pull that your financial advisor will be like really excited to help you do stuff with that. So here's the point in this context. You often need to negotiate these items in the discussion of what your job is going to look like and what is permitted because outside business opportunities are usually clearly outlined. Either they're fine or they're not fine. And if you want to do them, you may need to negotiate on this point. Like, listen, if I'm doing something on the weekends, I want it to be my money and I don't want it to be my employer's business. If you're negotiating with a big hospital or an academic center or a big national group, often they're not going to let you do that. So just being aware that you do need to negotiate this into your agreement in order to have it. That's helpful to know. Next slide. Yeah, so get it in advance. Next slide. Um, avoiding wasted time is really important. So being able to uh, identify concrete hurdles, especially in partnership. I was talking to a doctor last week. He said, I was with a group for 18 months. We got to the end of the 18 months where I was earning like 300K instead of the 500 the partners made in order to be able to access equity. And then at the end of 18 months, they said, you know what? We don't like you. We're not going to let you be a partner. Like that sucks. But also, they never talked about it for a year and a half. So you should have it written into your contract. We're going to talk about it every 3 months. I'm going to get progress reports and I'm going to understand if I'm on track. Because if I'm not on track, I want to know it after 3 or 6 months and not after a year and a half. That's a good way to make sure you don't get taken advantage of. In the interest of time, I'm going to just wrap it here and pass it back to Dr. Nasseri. And I welcome any questions to answer later.
Well, Justin, thank you very much. And the extent of what you are offering and what we're talking about, and this can take a full course of a semester, or if not more. But thank you very much for touching all these important topics. And everyone, if you have any questions specifically, please write it in the Q&A, and we'll try to address that uh, later on towards the end of the webinar. And with that, we're going to transition to the next section, which is negotiation, and that's going to be discussed with Dr. J.D. Williams, MD, MBA, who is dual board certified in anesthesiology and interventional pain medicine. Dr. Williams completed his fellowship training at the University of Utah and currently is practicing in Boise, Idaho. He specializes in advanced interventional pain management and minimally invasive surgical techniques. With that, Dr. Williams, please educate us about networking.
Fantastic. Yeah, just a quick shout out to Justin because I never met Justin until this evening, and it's an honor to be able to share the virtual stage with him. He's a wealth of knowledge. I was telling him when I was in, I'm assuming most of your guys' shoes as fellows and early stage career physicians, I was in the same boat and I was trying to understand what the heck's a work RVU and am I getting screwed on this contract? And so there's just great content by Justin out there, and I would 100% encourage you guys to reach out to him with any questions. So just so you know who you're talking to, so I'm JD, aka Dr. Williams. I'm an anesthesia pain trained interventional spine and pain specialist up here in Boise, Idaho. I finished fellowship around 2021. So when I was entering the job market, it was a weird COVID market, and I was dead set on private practice, but unfortunately didn't really trust any of these private practice physicians as far as I could throw them for all the reasons that Justin alluded to in his talk, right? So I ended up throwing my hat in the ring for a hospital job up in Boise, Idaho. Again, I'm originally from Colorado, as Dr. Nasseri pointed out, but I've been at a hospital job ever since. And recently, I am transitioning into my own private practice, and this whole concept of, again, everything Justin touched on, but this whole concept of networking has been really relevant to me, right? And in the 4 years I've been here, just willing to, have dinner with someone, grab a drink with someone, is kind of paying off right now, right? Because as I'm venturing into private practice, I now need all these other subject content experts, right? Like I need someone who knows how to negotiate with Blue Cross and help me kind of navigate that. I need to work with an architect to build out a pain and spine space, right? Like I need to figure out all these things. What's the best way to market, right? Where are my dollars best spent, right? How do I, balance staffing and budgeting and all those things, right? So having that network is critically important. But just so you know kind of who you're talking to and what my perspective is. So to jump into the nitty gritty of what we actually want to cover today. Going back to my business school days, I think networking kind of gets this bad term. To me, it was like it's almost like you're collecting Pokemon cards, right? Like you're just exchanging numbers without much purpose, right? And so I think we need to reframe what networking really is. I think it's clinical collaboration. It's what you guys do every day with a patient, right? You meet a patient, they have a problem, and you know that, hey, I need to get this patient to this goal, right? And so along the way, you have a bunch of different tools, right? You can do physical exam, and you can take a great history, and you can order diagnostic imaging and EMGs and reports and all this stuff. And you can do all these great therapies that we have available to us as interventional spine and pain specialists. And those tools, like that's what helps get you to your goal, right? Networking is basically that for your practice. And it doesn't really matter whether you're running the show as a private practice business physician owner, or maybe you're employed by the hospital, right? But you're still probably going to want to say, hey, you know what? I want to do more of X. I want to do more of Y. I really want to help these kind of patients, right? So all these same networking concepts and strategies are relevant to matter, no, my opinion, no matter what job role you take or what practice you're in, right? So think of networking as opening opportunities, as career advancement, right? Just to use another anecdote, like my hospital job was Monday through Thursday. And, through networking and just, again, talking to people, I do some industry consulting on some Fridays, and I do some other sort of cash pay stuff on Fridays. And that's been great, right? It's been an ancillary revenue stream, but I kind of get bored. And so having these other opportunities that literally just came from friends of friends and talking to friends of friends, like that's how these things come about, right? So that's kind of my gestalt on networking in general, just kind of as a conceptual thing. But I'm sure, again, sitting in your guys' shoes, what you're more worried about is finding that job, right? Finding the next job. Like, what is my next step? And I think before you're looking at the precipice, or before you jump off into the real world, so to speak, right? You probably have some doubt in your mind, right? You might be thinking, "Gosh, there's always been someone looking over my shoulder. There's always been an attending here, but this might seem impossible." Can we go next slide, please? And so I think memes are 100% truthful to life in general, right? And so you might be thinking, well, man, becoming an attending is impossible. Almost as impossible as maybe like a dog trying to drive a car, right? And so you can see like there's a dog in a car, right? And he's not going to go anywhere on his own. But clearly he's got some support behind him, right? He has this really great network of other people who are also trying to figure it out themselves, who also think, man, this is impossible, right? And they doubt themselves too. But the point I want to illustrate with this hilarious meme is that you can go a lot further and a lot faster when you take the time to foster a really good network of support, right? So just trying to put a little levity into the conversation today, but also just illustrate the point here. Can we go next slide, please, Rosa? Awesome. So the actual resources, things to actually talk about. Well, mentors are critical, right? Networking is just human interaction at the end of the day, right? It's just investing in human capital. And of course, if you're coming out of fellowship, you're sort of by default in this academic setting. And I still love all my academic attendings that I worked with, and still stay in touch with pretty much all of them. But um, you know, they have a very very sort of unique singular perspective on usually academics, right? But they don't really maybe understand what the private practice world is all about unless they have maybe come from private practice. So something that I would encourage all of you guys to do is maybe spend a day shadowing a private practice doc if you even think you're interested in academics, right? I'm sure you can work that out with your mentors and fellowship. But the thought is like, I think I want to do A, but you don't really know you want to do A until you've tried B, C, and D, right? All the different practices that or practice settings that Justin was talking about, right? So I think it pays to kind of get just many different perspectives. Another way to do that is through pain societies, PSPS, and there's a bunch of the other ones out there. Industry sponsored training courses, right? And all these things usually have sort of fellow specific courses where there's usually some networking component, right? Case in point, Dr. Trainer, Drew's going to be talking after me here. I met Drew when I was a fellow in Salt Lake City at the Marriott Hotel. There was a cadaver, some dead bodies in a ballroom, and Drew was nice enough to take some time out of his day and teach us some SCS stuff. And I remember, sure, I picked up some tips and tricks about how to put an implant in. But what I remember was actually talking to Drew and kind of understanding, pros and cons about life in general, but jobs in general and what to look for, do's and don'ts about private practice, right? And just walking away with sort of that perspective and that mindset was really the to me the higher value thing for that like afternoon I got to spend working with Drew. And again, with networking, it's all about paying it forward, right? Like I'm here talking to you, Drew invited me to come chat and be part of PSPS. And so I love being able to help other people who've kind of helped me. So that's the other thing too. What goes around comes around, and really just expanding your network outside of academics can be critically important. Real quick about device reps. So device reps, yeah, they kind of get a bad rep, and it's not entirely undeserved, I guess. But when I was looking, and I was casting a very broad net, right? So I was thinking, hey, I want to land up somewhere in the Mountain West. And so I didn't necessarily I had a pretty broad geographic net that I was casting, right? And so my strategy was to actually reach out to every device rep in whatever city I was interviewing with, right? And because, of course, again, like Justin said, when you talk to a practice, big group, small group, whatever, they're going to blow smoke up your butt. They're going to tell you that, man, everything's roses and sunshine and this is amazing. You're going to make $1 million just like the day you walk in the door, right? But you really got to kind of do your own homework. And one of the best ways to do that is to triangulate data, get as many data points as possible. And I think most reps genuinely want to help you because it's a small world, right? They don't want to burn bridges for better or for worse. So take, for example, let's say I'm in my practice and I'm looking to bring on another physician because I'm busy and I like to get some sleep at night, whatever it is. Like if you are maybe going to interview with me or you want to know what my practice and who I am and what I'm about, if you consider the source, right? Like if you talk to a rep that I do a lot of business with or a lot of cases with, he better say, I hope that he better tell you that I walk on water and I'm the greatest guy ever, right? You might ask another device rep who maybe doesn't work with me and say, hey, I don't do business with him. I don't do case with him, but I'd love to because I heard he's a great guy. If you have those data points, you can say, all right, maybe Doug Williams is okay. But if you talk to another rep and you say, man, I've heard nothing but crap about that guy. He's a terrible jerk, and I wouldn't even step foot in his office, right? Then you've done your research, right? So just really being able to triangulate, like I said, triangulate the truth amongst more data points with device reps can be very helpful. And I do think that most device reps, again, they have to walk a fine line with what they say and how they say it. But I feel like you can kind of read between the lines of them maybe steering you towards one practice or away from one practice, just kind of based on that. you know, recruiters, job boards, it's kind of self-explanatory. Just keep in mind that if you do sign up for these things, like you'll never get off these listservs. Recruiters will still call you. To be fair, I signed up for all of them because again, I was casting a very broad geographic job search. But keep in mind, I'm still on these things. I never actually tried to get off of them. So to me, it's an interesting barometer of kind of what does the market look like, right? And some days I wake up and I wonder what it would be like to be a paid doc in Biloxi, Mississippi, or whatever it is, right? So it's just kind of nice to maybe, if nothing else, maybe have leverage too. Like when Justin was talking about getting a job, it's just nice to have more data points, right? So I would recommend getting on those things unless you have a very specific interest. Social media, again, you guys are younger than I am. You guys are more savvy with this stuff. But even if you can't physically go to a conference or whatever. But if you're interested in a certain geographic area, like, yeah, get online and talk, reach out to whoever's in that market and they'll probably respond and they'll probably be willing to help you because we're all in the same boat. We've all been in the same shoes. We all want to help our colleagues. The last thing, just real quick, I'll leave you with, guys, is this concept that the best jobs out there are probably not advertised. So if all you're doing is just on job boards and just kind of whatever comes in your email, right? Everyone's seeing that. Call it kismet, call it chance, call it making your own luck. But again, there's maybe some doc out there that is maybe he's hiring, but he doesn't want to advertise it, right? He or she, right? And you're looking in the same market. And through the way the universe works, if you have a deeper, broader sort of network, things might line up, right? And those are the jobs that are probably more quality jobs as well, rather than just kind of some churn and burn private practice who just has to keep posting on a job board and has to, keep going to recruiters because maybe there's something wrong with that practice. So again, kind of a quick whirlwind on networking, but hopefully you guys found that helpful. And I will shut up now and pass the buck to Dr. Trainer, who's going to talk to you about some interesting personal considerations that are, again, of the utmost importance.
That was great, Dr. Williams. Thank you very much for all the advice and pearls. And those are super important things. I could not agree anymore. I mean, I have the job that I have just because of the connections and the relationships I built through conferences. And my partner is someone who ended up being my mentor early on. And then I randomly ended up having the job, and I'm super happy about it. And, all the other tips, super helpful. So it's important to pay attention to all of these. I won't take more time, just pass it on to Dr. Trainer. Dr. Drew Trainer is a private practice physician in Denver, Colorado, where he is a practice owner at the Denver Spine and Pain Institute. Without further ado, Dr. Trainer, please.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Nasseri, and thank you, Justin, and thank you, JD, for those excellent points and just a great presentation. So a little more background on me. So I graduated fellowship from Mayo up in Minnesota in 2016. And really early on in fellowship, I was presented with opportunities to stay within the health system up in Minnesota and also a job opportunity at the clinic in Scottsdale. And so ultimately I thought, this is likely where I'm going to go, right? I'm comfortable with Mayo. It's a great institution. It was something that, I felt like was a safe choice for me. But I'm from Colorado. And so I did a little bit of research and I found actually this job that I'm currently a practice owner in on the AAPM&R website. And so my now partner flew me out and we interviewed. I went to the Bronco game with my family. I was just like, man, it would be so great to be back in Colorado. That's something that's so important to me and something that I really, didn't realize until I came back. So ultimately, I took a little bit of a chance. And so In 2016, I was employed at my current practice, and it was a 36-month contract. And so I had a guaranteed salary, and there was a little bit of quarterly bonus structure built in. At that 36 months, I then had the opportunity to buy into the practice. And so I made the decision to do that. My partner and me are now equal owners in terms of the units in our operating agreement. And then about 3 years ago, we opened a surgery center collectively with another pain group. And so while it was a much bigger risk for me in 2016 to go into private practice, as compared to the safer choice, which would have been to stay within the Mayo system, ultimately now 9 years out of fellowship, it's really the best decision I think I've made in my life. And so, in this final section, I really want to talk to you all about the personal side of building a career in pain medicine. We'll explore market factors, lifestyle goals, even your hobbies that tie together to influence your guys' long-term satisfaction. My goal isn't to give you guys a formula. It's to help you guys think strategically about what kind of life you want to build and how to make decisions that align with those priorities. Next slide, please. So why does this matter? So when we're finishing fellowship or entering early practice, it's easy to focus almost entirely on procedural opportunities and compensation. But choosing where and how you practice is going to shape everything that follows. Your risk of burnout, your family dynamics, and really even your professional growth as you progress through your career. So I would encourage you all in terms of alignment. So align your daily work with your values, your personality, your personal interest, and your long-term goals. In this part of the talk, we'll talk about 4 key areas: market saturation, lifestyle, compensation, and then personal hobbies, and put that all together and look at how that fits nicely into, again, that term alignment. Next slide, please. Yep, perfect. So market saturation. One of the biggest mistakes I see in early career physicians is underestimating how much geography actually impacts opportunity. And so, in the major metropolitan areas, whether it's LA, whether it's San Francisco, whether it's Denver, whether it's Dallas, whether it's Phoenix, these are often more saturated with fellowship pain trained doctors. And that may mean fewer partnership opportunities and more competition for referrals. So that's in contrast to the secondary and tertiary markets. JD said, that he made the decision to go to Boise. Well, Boise is an up and coming city, right? It's growing very fast, but the number of specialists and providers in Boise as compared to Denver is significantly less. And so it's really given JD the opportunity, again, to make a big footprint in his community. And I really think it was an excellent decision. And I'm glad I helped perhaps guide that decision several years ago. Next slide, please. So lifestyle fit. So your career should serve your life, not the other way around. It's essential to define what an ideal week looks like for you, and before you decide what kind of job you want. Do you want academic variety? Do you want a procedural focus? Do you want, heavy clinic? Do you want to do anesthesia on the side? I mean, what does your ideal schedule throughout the week look like? Do you value predictable hours? Do you want stability? Do you want a set schedule every day? Or are you energized by building something? Do you want to be more entrepreneurial? Sometimes even the small things like commute time, call schedule, team cultures, that can really make or break your overall happiness. Again, as I mentioned, moving to Denver was a really good choice for me, and geography was very important, in that decision, not only to be closer to family, but because it really aligned with my interests. So I do a lot of, outdoors activities. In the winter, we're up in the mountains almost every weekend, skiing. And so, that's really important for my overall happiness and my overall job, personal life balance. When we think about burnout, it's not usually about overwork. Again, it's more about misalignment. So we choose a job that really doesn't align with our goals. So compensation varies widely across regions. Justin did a very good job of discussing that already. Hospital or employed positions tend to offer more stability, as Justin mentioned. with lower administrative burden, right? In private practice, you are going to have to take on a lot of that administrative role, and that's typically going to be done outside of your normal clinic hours. However, with private practice, you do have more control, you have more autonomy, and you do have more potential for growth, and you can actually control that growth. ASC or ancillary ownership is, I think, really important long-term wealth driver. Again, it has been for me in my practice. As I said previously, we opened a physician-owned surgery center a few years ago. Now, I'm not saying when you initially get into your job or you're negotiating a contract that you're going to be offered ownership up front. But I do think you need to seriously look at what is the likelihood that I will have the opportunity in the future to buy into that surgery center. And if so, what does that look like, right? You want to make sure that you're getting pro formas. You want to see the financials. You want to get a deeper understanding of what my return on investment is going to be. With all that said, I recommend that you don't just chase the highest starting number, right? We want a position, again, that fits your goals. It offers mentorship. It allows ownership in your schedule. It allows you to practice medicine the way that you want. Ultimately, this is going to provide a lot greater return for you, both financially and personally, especially over time, right? We're looking at longevity. Next slide, please. So as we all know, the landscape of pain medicine is evolving quickly, right? We're moving towards minimally invasive spine procedures. Neuromodulation is becoming a greater part of all of our practice as interventional pain physicians. And these newer hybrid models that integrate like regenerative medicine and a stronger emphasis on interdisciplinary care, like physical therapy, behavioral health, maybe even nutrition counseling. This is sort of the evolution of pain medicine, especially in the private practice realm, and really even in some of the bigger tertiary care centers as well. So this evolution in the space, it really does create more opportunities, in my opinion. When you decide to build a practice, so let's say you go into private practice, it's really important that you are able to brand and differentiate yourself. And that's going to be more important than ever. A lot of patients are coming, at least to our practice, directly as direct-to-consumer marketing, right? And so your ability to market yourself, not only to your referral providers, but also to the patients that are in your community, and how to really let them know why your clinic is different. How do you differentiate yourself from other people who are competitors down the block? And, how can you provide, the best high quality care for your patients? Next slide. So lifestyle integration, I like to call this the whole physician concept. So your physical health, your mental health, and your relationships directly influence where you're going to lead, perform, and how you're ultimately going to connect and care for your patients. Incorporate fitness, sleep hygiene, sleep quality, and personal recovery. Take that as serious as you do taking care of your patients. Patients can really sense when you're fully engaged, and they can sense when you're running on fumes. And I can speak to that personally. There have been times when I've felt, just really drained. I hadn't, taken, a day off or a vacation in months and months and months. And, these chronic pain patients are difficult, right? I mean, they do take a lot out of you. And there have been times when I've been running on fumes and I could really sense that my patients pick that up. And remember, that relationship with that patient is so important. They really ultimately just want to know that you care and that you're willing to put in the energy to, give them the best possible outcome. Next slide, please. So personal hobbies and fulfillment. So never lose the part of yourself that existed before pain medicine, right? Make sure you maintain your hobbies, whether that's fitness, whether that's golf, whether that's skiing, whether that's travel, whether that's spending time with your family. These really aren't luxuries. They're protective factors, again, against that burnout. Your ability to participate in these activities are going to keep you creative. They're going to keep you grounded. And ultimately, they're going to make you more relatable to your patients. Next slide, please. So putting it all together, this is just a simple framework that I would recommend. So first of all is clarify your values. Again, what kind of life do you want? Second, assess the market, right? Do you want to be in a major metropolitan area where opportunities may be less, but that's number one on your list? Or do you look at some of these up and coming cities where you may have more opportunity and more autonomy to build the practice that you want? Third is negotiate smartly. Justin's talked a lot about that in the first portion of this. Make sure you align your contract with your values and your growth goals. Again, what that lifestyle looks like. And then fourth, protect your time. And I think that's really important. We want to make sure that we set boundaries early in our career because, again, especially in pain medicine, because we are dealing with some of the more challenging patients that walk through all providers' doors. We really want to make sure that we're setting firm boundaries and that we're taking care of ourselves. And so, in closing, the goal is to build a career that mirrors your identity, not just your credentials. Choose purpose over pressure. Prioritize your relationships, prioritize your fitness, and just display gratitude for where you are. If you do that, your career will feel sustainable. It'll be deeply rewarding and not just successful on paper. As you can see at the bottom, that's my email address. If you guys have any questions, any concerns, anything that comes up along your job search, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Thank you.
All right, the trainer, thank you very much. It was very well said. I could not have thought any better of putting all this topic together. Super important advice, so keep all that in mind. That's all I can say. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. Dr. Alan Lin and Dr. David Lee are running the LIT program. I just wanted to give a shout out to them for a great and amazing job they've been doing. Next slide, please. So there's a question here I think Justin already answered, but I'm gonna read it out loud. And maybe Justin, if you want to chip in a couple words on this. And if there's any other questions, please don't hesitate to put it in a Q&A and we'll be happy to answer those. So the question we have here is that if a health system is offering both a 1099 option and a W-2 option, and the W-2, they both pay for malpractice regardless of if you're choosing 1099 or W-2, no 401k match, and you have a spouse working elsewhere, so you don't need insurance, which one of the two would you pick? And Justin has put a very detailed answer here, but if you want to jump in and address that quickly, Justin, in a second,
Sure.
in a minute or so, please.
Yeah, the short version is 1099 should always be higher. How much higher varies based on how benefits rich the W-2 offer would be. So if you're 1099, you're not going to get healthcare, you're not going to get a 401k match. Something, it sounds like in this case, MedMal would be covered, but if it's not covered, we need to add that in. If it's a very benefits rich environment, then a 1099 offer, which would be at parity, could need to be 20 or 25% premium. So if it's 500K W-2, you'd want to see 600K, to use round numbers, of 1099 in order for that to be roughly apples to apples. If it's a more, if there's a paucity of benefits with the W-2 offering, then something closer to parity, but I would still want to see a 10 to 12 to 15% premium on the 1099 offer just because of the administration complexity, because you're going to have to do a separate tax return. That's going to cost money. You might have to run payroll for yourself. That's going to cost money. You're going to need to keep your own books. That's going to cost money. And you're going to be paying the employer portion of Social Security taxes, which is 7.65%. So all that goes into, like, if it's 1099, it should be at least 10%, maybe 15 to be apples to apples to a W-2 offer.
Great answer. Thank you very much. And right now, I don't see any other questions. Next slide, please, Rosa. So we have two QR codes here. This one is, please join us for the third portion of this webinar series. This is a QR code if you want to register, and there will be mailers and emails sent out about it as well. But please register. We'll be happy to have you guys on the third portion of this as well. It will be very informative. And next one, we're gonna have the QR code for the mid-year lab, which is gonna be in Seattle at the end of March 2026. Please register. It will be a very impactful lab, very variety of different procedures will be discussed and taught in the cadaver lab. So another question here from Blake. We have, what is the landscape for locums and pain? Meaning the length of typical contract, pay, other considerations. Anyone wants to take on that?
I'll just speak to my experience. I have seen it infrequently. I've seen day rates on sort of an ad hoc basis, like 1,500 to 2,200 bucks a day, 1099, kind of just a flat day rate, not attached to production. It's going to vary based on geography and based on the clinical setup. In general, it can be an okay way to sort of test drive a practice, but it's not like anesthesia where you can like literally just do locums and make a great living and do, 2 weeks out of the month and have that be economically beneficial. It tends to be, in order to economically benefit from all the things you can do as a pain doc, you typically need to be planted somewhere a little more permanently, in my observation.
Yeah,
I agree. I did a couple months of that before I started my permanent job between fellowship and my current job, and it was paying good, but it was very basics, and you don't have much of flexibility or I mean, at least the experience I had, you're a lot of time at the mercy of the practice owners. Uh, so it's, for a short period of time as a side gig might be a good opportunity. If you want to build something as far as your reputation and you're more interested in more advanced interventions, probably that's not going to be the best option from my experience. And I think someone else was going to talk about that too.
Yeah, I was just gonna echo what you guys are both saying because like I said, I didn't unsubscribe to any of these things. I will say more anesthesia opportunities than paying jobs. And yeah, it's kind of bread and butter stuff. It's not really, build it the way you want. So I think there's less opportunity, less pay, and again, kind of a not really, probably not as fulfilling, right? Depending on what you want to do. Like if you want to do all the new advanced interventional stuff as a new fellow, probably not the most fulfilling role, unless it's like a locums that might become a permanent job if that's what the system's looking for. And I have seen a couple of those kind of floating out there in the last couple of months, just for what it's worth.
Definitely. All right. Not seeing any other questions. We have a couple more minutes if there's any burning questions. I have the contact information for all of us. And Rosa, if it's not here, please share. We'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have at any point as you're growing and entering the practice world. I think with that, we'll end the session. Thank you very much for attending and joining us here. Looking forward to seeing you all at the next session of these webinar series. And thank you very much for all the speakers.